Well, let's get to the wide receivers that are a little more interesting then. Jakobi Meyers, brutal matchup against this really good Broncos defense, Lawrence. Yeah. They're allowing the third fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season for a Raiders offense that they've really struggled throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, they've struggled. They'll continue to struggle, but they'll continue to, struggle to keep up in this game, too, with the Broncos. And I see them having to throw more. So it's weird. Like, Jakobi Meyers, on the season, he's averaging 7.5 targets per game, 5.5 receptions, and 57 yards per game, right? So I think that's just kind of, if you heard those numbers and you, matched them up with Jakobi Meyers, you'd be like, yeah, that's Jakobi Meyers. I'll leave it open because those are the numbers that I think he can get. I think that's the floor of what he'll be able to get versus this team in Denver, a game that they'll have to be throwing against this team.
Some points,
I'm keeping it open as well. I get the question, right? Last week, kind of a quiet game, 4 for 28 on 6 targets in the first game in which Scott Turner was the offense coordinator. So you're kind of in a game in which, they were trailing and you're sort of like, it was all Brock Bowers. And so you're sort of like, man, new offensive coordinator, is it just maybe Scott Turner doesn't like Jakobi Meyers. Maybe this is going to be a pass offense that just entirely funnels through Brock Bowers. They're playing against Denver. He's probably going to see at least some Patrick Surtain. It's worth noting that the 4 receptions that Jakobi Meyers got came from the slot last week, so they'll play him some in the slot, so he'll avoid Surtain in some of this game. I'm still keeping it open, though. First off, 6 targets is 6 targets. If you're telling me in a week in which 6 teams are on a bye, I've got a starting wide receiver who's been productive in the NFL that's going to get 6 targets, I'm in. He's my wide receiver 22 this week. By the way, first matchup with Denver earlier this year against the same team, he went 6 for 72. So, and with their run game banged up, we don't know yet the status of Madison or Zamir White. There's only so many times that Amir Abdullah can touch the ball.
Dylan Labe.
It might be Dylan Labe time, exactly. So I'm keeping it open with Jakobi Meyers, wide receiver 22. Again, I am keeping in the back of my mind, is there a switch in offensive philosophy because of Turner calling the plays? Is there something, that we're not aware of between that they don't like Meyers as much as the previous staff? But I think it was just a game script kind of thing. And by the way, Bowers was just always open.
You almost wonder in this game, and this is weird, but it does happen once in a while, they just have Surtain travel with Bowers.
Right.
If you are the Broncos,
if I was
why
there,
wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't
I would
you?
do that.
I mean, Bowers had 16 targets last week.
16.
He tore up the Miami Dolphins.
Tore them up.
A good secondary.
Miami Dolphins, as a team, smokes them. But they couldn't do nothing with that young man there.
Yeah, I put Surtain on him.
Yeah, I would too. I haven't seen somebody tear up Miami like that since Lawrence went there for a bachelor party last year. That's the last time I saw somebody tear up Miami.
Who?
That's the last time I saw somebody tear up Miami
bachelor
like that.
party
this,
Yeah,
Lawrence
exactly.
Jackson?
I'm just saying.
What bachelor party was it? Did I go to your bachelor
It wasn't in Miami. Oh, boy. I'll get you out of here. We'll move on to DeVonta Smith. DeVonta Smith's got the Rams, and his offensive...
Tore up that city is what he did.
Yeah.
Tore it up.
Never allowed back.
Never
His
allowed
version of
back.
East Lansing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's his East Lansing.
Oh, God. DeVonta Smith, Kellen Moore's offensive coordinator this week, was asked on how the receivers are handling the Eagles being so run-heavy recently. Take a listen to this.
The beauty of what we have on offense, we got a lot of really talented players, and they all deserve opportunities in these games. And so, in the past game, when you have a game like that where you have a lot of rushing attempts and not as many passing opportunities, naturally those guys aren't going to get as many touches probably as they deserve and have earned. But I think those guys, you're constantly in conversation about those opportunities eventually present themselves. Again, like we said, not every game are we going to be able to rush 40, 45 attempts. We'd love to. But there's going to come different games and different styles, and that's the beauty of the NFL, that every week's a different challenge. And there's going to come a time we're going to have to sling it around and make some plays in some critical situations, and those guys will be ready.
Yeah. Reminds me of your time in Miami where sometimes you just have to sling it around, Lawrence. You understand what Kellen Moore was saying there.
How I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, look, DeVonta Smith comes in at wide receiver 24 for me. I get it. Disappointing game last week, just 4 for 29. He was wide receiver 54 on the week, but as you heard Kellen Moore there, you're not always going to be able to run on a team like the way they could on my Commanders. Don't get me started. Positives here about this game. I'm keeping it open on DeVonta Smith. He is my wide receiver 24 again, as you saw there. 48.5 over-under. So hopefully they're scoring on both sides of the ball. Rams are red hot. This game is in L.A. on Sunday night. It's our game on NBC and Peacock. Of course, I'm a company man. So the question is does he get the volume? And I think, again, in this week, because of the high-scoring nature of this game, I think he will get the volume. When he sees at least 6 targets this year, he's averaging 16.2 fantasy points per game. When DeVonta Smith gets looks, he has fantasy production. It's fairly simple here as well. 3 of the last 4 games, he's gotten at least 1 end zone target. When you're in the back of the end zone and you can catch with one hand, the ball comes your way more often than not. It's worth noting the Rams tied for the 4th most touchdowns allowed to opposing wide receivers. So I think there's a chance Smith gets into the end zone on this one. He's a mid-tier flex for me. I'm keeping it open on DeVonta Smith in Week 12.
When you see guys who have gotten 6 receptions for 43 yards in their last 2 games, it's hard to ignore something like that. But I completely ignore that when it comes to DeVonta Smith because I just think he's an exceptional player. Look, the Rams get out early in this game, which, by the way, Matthew, is up to 49 now. So
oh, wow, okay.
we going to have us some points in that game. Rams get off to a fast start, just like Kellen Moore said. Depending on how the game goes, and we know how the Rams want to play. Kyron Williams hasn't been having good games recently. They've been relying on the pass, so expect the Eagles to keep up with that. Rams, too, they're a bottom 12 pass defense. You look at their past couple of weeks, like my man Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver 17 against the Rams last week.
Yeah.
Shout out to him. Before that, Tyler Lockett was wide receiver 23, and he hasn't had many good games this year from a statistical standpoint. So I like DeVonta Smith to bounce back in this as well. We keeping it open.
Romeo Doubs, our next receiver, against the 49ers, 3 straight games with under 11 fantasy points, Lawrence. Doubs was hot for a stretch after having that weird incident that he wasn't happy with his role in the offense. Now it's kind of gone back to the way things were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, we might need him to get suspended again.
Right. Yeah.
So he could take a game off, then come back and be a top 15 fantasy receiver.
I mean, that's what happened with Jay Croucher. You remember Jay was complaining about his role on the show. We gave him a couple of days off. Came back, he's been hitting bets left and right.
He really has.
He's been on fire.
Yeah.
He's been on
He
fire.
can't miss right now.
Luis Gill, 100%.
Yeah.
He's been in fuego. Sometimes it just takes him, you know what?
It takes.
Right, exactly.
And
you know what, Jay? And he's not here today because we're like, you know what, Jay, just
we almost need you to cool off. You're making me and Matthew look bad right now.
It's load management for
Yeah,
Jay.
well, he's not coming off suspension. Romeo Doubs isn't. So I'm going to keep it close. And it's weird, too, because 2 things. He's not even close. He's been leading this Packers receiving group in snap count the past two games. No other Packers receiver has been playing more than 70% of the snaps these past 2 games. The other crazy thing too is one or 2 or some combo of these 2 of 4 Packers wide receivers will do something in this game against the 49ers. We just don't know who because it doesn't matter who they use. They all see him equally. DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba combined for 17 receptions, 180 yards last week against the 49ers. So it's going to happen because you got Jordan Love back there, but we don't know who. This is why I'm closing it out on Romeo Doubs this week.
I'm closing it out as well, Lawrence. I'm right there with you. Wide receiver 39 for me. I mean, you saw it there on your screen. Like, no Packers wide receiver has a target share over 20% this year. Like, not one of them. They've got 4 good ones, which is great for the Packers and annoying for us in the world of fantasy football. Last 2 weeks, Dobbs' target share just 13%. He's got 2 games this year, 2 games where he's had more than 12 fantasy points. Like, there's always a chance he gets into the end zone. Of course, they do look for him when they get in close, but it just, like, you're just throwing darts here to figure, oh, is this a Dontavian Wicks game? Oh, is it Jaden Reed? Also, especially feels like recently, last couple of weeks, Christian Watson has started to emerge more as kind of that alpha, and then the other 3 are sort of, looking around for scraps. Josh Jacobs is running well. The defense is playing well, so they're not getting into shootouts either. It's worth noting that San Francisco, this is not an easy matchup. Niners allow the 5th fewest yards per game to perimeter wide receivers, which is obviously where Dobbs line up a lot of the time. And so, yeah, he's barely inside my top 40 this week. I'm closing it out on Romeo Doubs.
Which Packers wide receiver you have the most faith in right now? At least maybe by a floor perspective, because Watson's the easy ceiling answer, I think.
For this particular week, I would say Jaden Reed.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
That's literally for this week.
If you're going to attack the Niners, I feel
because
like the slot
because you
is the
see
easier
what
way.
Jackson Smith-Njigba did. He 10 for 110.
Yeah.
So for this week, I would say Jaden Reed, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, our tight end on the list here, guys, TJ Hockenson. He's at Chicago. Had the 1 big game 2 weeks ago, Matthew, and the other 2 he's been under 30 receiving yards.
Yeah, I've been a little bit up and down. Like, again, coming back from a major injury. The offense has been, the Vikings offense after such a hot start is sort of, I don't want to say they've completely slowed down, but they haven't been as effective. That game against Jacksonville was brutal. Just everyone as well. But I'm keeping it open. 6 teams on a bye. And, oh, by the way, he's a tight end. And he's a tight end who has been good for the majority of his career. He had one game this year with 5 targets, right? One game, that was week 10 at Jacksonville, that Jacksonville game where everything else wasn't working. And he still went 8 for 72 in that one, 15.2 fantasy points. And it's not as bad a matchup on the road at Chicago as you might think. Bears have allowed at least 12 fantasy points to a tight end in 3 of the past 5. So you see it there on your screen. Hockenson, 3rd on the team in target share after Jefferson and Jordan Addison. This is over the last 3 weeks since Hawk has come back. He's my tight end 9. I'm keeping it open for T.J. Hockenson.
There's a slight concern. You see that name below T.J. Hockenson, Josh Oliver. He's got a little less target share, but he's been playing more snaps in every game this year. With that being said, Chicago's allowing 52 yards per game to the tight end position. You mentioned the bye weeks. Just to get deeper on that, that's Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid, and/or Dawson Knox, Taysom Hill, Kyle Pitts, and if you start either of the Cincinnati tight ends. So running back, receiver is different, but if you're missing these guys on bye, you can't possibly be in that type of position to say, we'll sit T.J. Hockenson. I'm leaving it open.
Do you think in the offseason, this is just a question that occurred to me, do you think in the offseason, T.J. Hockenson, whoever represents T.J. Hockenson, should he call up whoever represents the Hawk Tua girl and say, it's the Hawk and Hawk show?
Collab.
It's a collab. Let's get together.
Like a series, though.
Like I'm just,
Like
just
a 4-part series.
4-part series. Maybe they solve crimes.
It's
Hawk and Hawk.
It's something to think about.
This is this kind of stuff that I think of.
It's like the very famous bit when a Mike Francesa caller said, when the San Francisco Giants are in town, do you think they get together with the New York Giants? It's the same exact thing. But in this era, you could actually make content and money out of it.
You're telling me you wouldn't tune into the first episode of Hawk and Hawk? Of course you would.
It'd be my drive time content.
I'm telling you, I wouldn't.
No.
But I'm only one person in America, so
that
that's
a
just
demo?
me.
So that's fine.
That's
So they
just
get a
me.
99%
They got
rating share.
I think it's a large percentage. I just won't be part of it.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.